Artificial intelligence. Like other recent trends in tech, anyone who understands the underlying technology would tell you not to believe the hype. LLMs are just a new form of procedural generation. They're not intelligent in any real sense, but the marketing behind them has caused a gold rush that threatens to destroy the internet and accelerate the loss of personal connection we've witnessed over the last 20 years. There's some hope that they'll cease to exist in the coming years. We're already seeing the models degrade due to recycling of data. It's also clear that these companies have no idea what their models are trained on, so researchers may find biases or copyright infringement that result in major lawsuits, forcing companies to think twice about the whole thing. But for now, we're left to speculate and argue. It's interesting to note the arguments for and against our so-called AI, the ways in which they might mirror science fiction and the ways in which they don't. The most interesting argument is one that is stated silently through the actions of companies. It goes something like this. It doesn't matter if the output of these AI programs is real art or complete gibberish. It still makes us money. This argument's interesting because it shouldn't be true, but it appears to be. You shouldn't be able to sell week-old horse meat as dry-aged steak, yet it seems you can. But why? The reason's hard to get at. It's linked to a much bigger problem, the slow degradation of our expectations and the way that everything has been reduced to a transaction. It's the kind of thing we encode in a story. And so, if you'll allow it, let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. You're here because you want the answer to a question. It's the question that drives us, the question that brought you here. You know the question, just as I did. What is the Matrix? Well, the short answer is it's a combination of the work of Jean Baudrillard and the Christian Bible, but you probably already knew that. A lot of people have talked about simulacra and simulation in the context of the internet, and while it's certainly becoming the best example of a hyperreality, I think there are more concrete examples. Literally, as in they're made of concrete. Let me describe an experience. You go to a place and you stay there, waiting, but there's nothing to do. You browse shops, you sit in a lounge, and you make phone calls. It's a place of transition. Very few people stay longer than they have to, and most are just passing through. This is an airport, or Dubai. I've never been, but I hear that's the general vibe. It also means this guy experienced the Matrix long before it hit theatres. But what is it about these places that feels so fake? Well, they're generally in the middle of nowhere due to the noise. This means they're separated from any local culture. They also receive a lot of foot traffic, which means businesses will pay a premium for space, favouring larger franchises. The staff see completely different people every day, which means they can't build long-term relationships with their customers. All of this results in a purely transactional atmosphere, where everyone's reduced to a single purpose. The only people you know are the ones you bring with you. This means the same businesses, the same experience, and a complete lack of cultural expression in every airport. If not for the signs telling you which city you were in, you would have no idea. This is the Matrix in Baudrillard's conception of it, the replication of a pattern in many locations as a uniform unit. The removal of individual differences in favour of bland familiarity. You likely experience a similar effect wherever you live. You probably have a McDonald's and a Starbucks, maybe more than one. And if we both visited our local McDonald's, we would probably find that we had a very similar experience. Where they spring up, these franchises act like weeds, killing the businesses around them. They annex territory and terraform it to suit their needs. And to what end? Monopoly. The elimination of an anomaly, one that is inherent to our nature, that of choice. If you live in a town that has McDonald's, why would you ever go to McDonald's in another town? They're all the same, aren't they? Not quite. They do everything in their power to promote uniformity, but they still need people to operate them. Well, some people. Imagine for a moment that the future love of your life, your perfect soulmate, if you believe in such a thing, worked in a McDonald's one town over. That if you went there and talked to them, your life would be changed forever. You would never know. Even if you did end up there, you'd probably just ask them for a Big Mac and then leave. Small side note, I'm talking metaphorically. Please don't go to a McDonald's one town over in a quest to find love. This is the matrix of our world, but it emerges from one of Baudrillard's earlier works, the system of objects. Let's talk about you. You are real, you have a life, you have thoughts and fears, concerns and responsibilities. You have interests, maybe you love coffee or crochet or music. Perhaps you have a job that means a lot to you and provides you with satisfaction. Or perhaps your job is just a means to an end, a way to pay the bills so you can do the things you care about. Maybe you're in a committed relationship, or maybe you're alone. Perhaps you can solve a Rubik's Cube, or remember the first 100 digits of pi. There's something that brings you joy, your son's smile, a cold shower on a hot day, or the sound that plays when you win a game of Fortnite. Your experience is unique and interesting. It's the culmination of all your life choices. But I'm not real. I'm a voice and a face on a screen, a series of thoughts about programming and mental health. The sum of my existence to date is just under 2 hours. I'm a reflection of your thoughts, filtered through the words I've spoken in that time. If you've watched all my content, you know things about me. You know I have ADHD, that I'm a software developer, and that I hate bureaucracy. You may not know I'm incredibly good at scanning large documents for typos, or the only word I struggle to spell is, funny enough, bureaucracy. That my dad taught me to play chess when I was 5 years old, and it took me 25 years to beat him. That I used to cheat when we played snakes and ladders. That he was aware of it, but that we both pretended he wasn't. There are days when I feel invincible, days when I want to tear everything apart, days when I cry myself to sleep. But those moments only exist for me. You are aware of me in a peripheral sense, as an extension of your own thoughts and desires, just as you're aware of everyone else. People exist in the context in which you interact with them, and then they cease to exist. They return to their empty houses to sit and stare fiercely into the wall until you next meet them. This is a simulation, the model of reality constructed by your subconscious mind. It exists for a reason. Without it, you would be unable to function. You'd be bombarded with useless information at all times of the day. A torrent of data that would bring you to your knees. Consider the main street of your town or wherever you go shopping. Try and picture the locations of all the businesses. The ones you go to most often are probably quite clear: your grocery store, the coffee shop, the pub. Others might be less clear: the hairdresser, the dry cleaner, and the taxi rank. And in certain spaces there are just blanks. You know there's something there, but you don't know what. If you think about the place you live, your housing estate or apartment block, you might only know 2 or 3 of your neighbours. This is just default human perception. We filter out the things, and yes, the people, who don't matter to us. We build a map of our world that prioritizes the things we care about. But that map has been altered. There are now pins on it that are not relevant to you at all. Products spread across the map like a virus, corrupting and obscuring the details that once mattered. The name of the person in the coffee shop, their hopes and dreams, their unique skills and interests, the traumatic experiences that shaped their world. They're no longer a person, they're the other end of a transaction. A coffee dispenser, the means to obtain a product. This doesn't make you a bad person, just easily manipulated like all humans. To the other person, you're just a money dispenser, a means to obtain the products that they desire. You and this person probably know less about each other than you do about Logan Paul or Raid Shadow Legends, and this is by design. Marketing is about the manipulation of perception. Their entire job is to insert their product into our lives, so it becomes more relevant to the people around us. We're told that products deserve their place on the map more than people. That happiness is just one financial transaction away. The people cease to matter, and then they cease to exist. This is my favourite guitar, my Cort KX1Q. It's not a top-of-the-line guitar, but it's very solid. Let me tell you a bit about it. When I was 14, I got really into guitar. I started out on a cheap acoustic from Argos, which is basically Amazon for boomers, and eventually wanted an electric guitar. We decided to go to a music shop one town over and get some advice. They showed me some of their budget models and let me try them out, and didn't push anything on me. I settled on a Yamaha Pacifica, which is still in my parents' attic. They even threw in a free gig bag, cables, and a practice amp. When I turned 18, my parents asked what I wanted for my birthday, and I told them I wanted to get a better guitar. There was no question of where we would get it. Again, they didn't try to sell me some expensive guitar or flashy signature model. They just gave me a few options and let me try them out. And so I ended up with this, which I still love 16 years later. It's really nice to play, but more importantly, it represents something sentimental to me. My parents' support for my hobbies, the many hours I spent practicing, and the relationship I had with the people who worked in that shop. But that shop no longer exists. Like most other music shops, it was outcompeted by online retailers. People would come into their store, try a guitar, and then buy it online to save €5. People treated them as a means to an end, and now they're gone. I haven't met any of them since the shop closed down several years ago, and I probably never will. They've been replaced by a computer program because we stopped caring about them. This is the world in which AI can replace people, one where we already see them as robots that are designed to serve our needs. Products have become increasingly involved in our lives because our perception of them has changed. They're now a part of our identity. We can roll our eyes at people with Gucci bags and fancy watches all we like, but very few of us are actually above this. I've been playing Counter-Strike on and off for the last 20 years. It's a hobby, yes, but at times it's been an important part of my identity. When I'm having a hard time at work or feeling lonely, I tend to play more. I do this because I want to feel some control in my life. To know that despite things going wrong, I have value, that I'm good at something. But in this context, it ceases to be just a game. Winning a match means I'm a good person with the skills to succeed. Losing a match means I'm worthless, that I've wasted 20 years only to suck at something. This is why people rage at competitive games. Like everyone else, I started out with an old CRT monitor, a trackball mouse, and the keyboard that came with my PC. In those first years, I practiced to get a lot better at the game, but then something happened. I started watching professional games and saw ads for the equipment they were using. I realised that was it. It wasn't my fault I was losing, it was the tools at my disposal. Fast forward to today and I have a 144Hz reference colour monitor, a Hall effect keyboard that detects pressure down to 1/10 of a millimetre, and a wireless mouse that weighs less than 2 ounces. And yet I still fail. As I improve, I play against better and better players, but this change doesn't register, because I don't see the other players in the game as distinct people. Subconsciously, there's still that guy from last month, and I'm way better than he was. And so when this person beats me, I need a new excuse, because it can't be me. I have all the equipment and advantages money can buy, but I still lost. The only explanation is that the other person is cheating, or got lucky. All of this motivated reasoning exists to protect my self-image. But it also makes me vulnerable to this kind of parasitic marketing. It's the flaw in my brain that's exploited by corporations to steal my money. It's the part of me that went out and bought an expensive coffee grinder or spent 2 weeks researching brushes before painting my first Warhammer mini. The part of me that wants to click on every video that says 50 things I wish I knew before I started. It's the hijacking of my simulation, the virus. It forces me into passive consumption by telling me that I don't need determination or practice to solve my problems. Just this new product. Order now, only $79.95. In 1978, Václav Havel wrote an essay entitled The Power of the Powerless. He lived in communist Czechoslovakia, and the essay describes the post-totalitarian nature of the state. Where once they had soldiers kicking in doors and dragging people off to gulags, this was no longer necessary. Everyone in the system claimed they loved communism because they knew if they didn't, they would get into trouble. So long as everyone went along with it, the government could claim their people were free. They no longer needed top-down control because everyone in the system had become an agent of the system, oppressing themselves and those around them. They lived a lie, allowing the lie to maintain itself. He described this system of socially enforced control as social auto-totality. Havel's idea was that people should live in the truth, that small displays of defiance would cause an overreaction, which would expose the pettiness of the system. If a shopkeeper refused to put up a pro-communist slogan in his window, they would fire him, threaten his family, and try to destroy him. He would be punished, yes, but it would expose the system for what it was, and this would cause a cascade of other people to find the system in response, which would lead to the downfall of the regime. If you wish to see social auto-totality in action, just go on LinkedIn for 20 minutes. It's incredible to see the mental gymnastics people undertake in order to grovel before a potential employer they've never met. People assume they can't speak their mind because they'll lose out on a potential job in the future. This may be true, but if you don't try, you'll never know. I recently saw someone post that they had been selected to voluntarily part ways with their employer, and I nearly spilled my drink laughing. The irony of this is that in challenging the statement, a company would show its pettiness. Taken literally, they were praising their old employer, but it was clear that they were told not to say they were laid off because it might scare away investors. Now for something completely different. I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply. And multiply until every natural resource is consumed. And the only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure. So let's talk about Christianity in the Matrix. I think it's trying to extract the core of Christianity without all the baggage that we're well aware of. Creation myths tend to tell the story of a civilization and explain the existence of humanity. The Christian origin story is referred to as the fall of man, and it's quite interesting. It's the story of Adam and Eve. It's shared with other Abrahamic religions like Judaism and Islam, but the Christian interpretation includes the idea of original sin. You may have learned this story as a child, but let's just recap it briefly so that we're all on the same page. Adam and Eve live in the Garden of Eden, a place where everything is provided for them by God. God tells them they can do anything they desire as long as they don't eat from a particular tree. A snake convinces Eve to take an apple from the tree, and she takes a bite, and then she shares it with Adam. God searches for Adam and finds him hiding. Adam explains that he's naked and felt ashamed of his nudity. God asks how he knows that he's naked, and he throws Eve under the bus, telling God that she made him eat the apple. God throws them out of the garden and basically tells them their lives are going to suck from now on. If you learned this as a kid, you were likely told the moral of the story was to do what you're told and not challenge authority. God knows best, so don't ask questions. But this is an alteration, a version of the story told to children so that they're obedient. The story itself isn't that simple. Let's talk about the tree. It's known as the tree of knowledge of good and evil. At this point in the story, only God knows good and evil. Humans, like other animals, don't have this knowledge. But what does knowing good and evil mean? Why does it make Adam ashamed of being naked? I believe the author of this text recognized some aspect of humans that differed from other animals, and instilled them with the knowledge of good and evil, and that it was also the part of us that made us feel self-conscious, our conscious minds. As far as we know, animals act on a subconscious level. They can't be good or evil because they don't understand right and wrong. If you get in shark-infested waters, you're responsible for your own death, because sharks are not considered moral actors. Animals are a reflection of their DNA. They follow genetically encoded instincts which are regulated by natural selection. They may perform behaviors that seem intelligent, like burying food to preserve it, but this is a random mutation that made them better at survival. My parents have a Shih Tzu named Cody. He tries to bury treats even though he knows that they're going to provide him with fresh food every morning. He has never needed to dig any of them up, but he still performs this behavior. But he does know things, at least subconsciously. He can learn to recognize patterns. If I take out a pack of cigarettes, he stands at the back door waiting for me. He doesn't know that I have an addiction or what a cigarette is. He's just recognized this ritual I perform that ends with me going outside. In systems theory, this is called heuristic reasoning, the simulation of patterns. Our subconscious minds do the same thing, analyzing body language to determine whether we should hug someone or shake their hand. The thing that separates us from other animals is our conscious mind. We can understand abstract ideas like morality and time. This makes us moral actors because we can understand good and evil, but it comes with other implications. Imagine on your way to work every morning you pass an apple tree. You take an apple and eat it while you walk. One day you notice there are less apples than there were last week. You decide to take 2 just in case there are none left tomorrow. The next person notices the rate of decline is increasing, so they take 3. Within a few days, a problem that was months away has already happened. A few selfish people have hoarded all the apples, and there are none left for people who only took what they need. There may have been enough to go around, but the fear of being left empty-handed has made that a reality for others. Our conscious mind is a blessing and a curse. It's a meta-adaptation that allows us to quickly adapt to changing circumstances, but it's also the source of our pain and suffering. Other animals will die and have behaviors that extend their lives, but they're not aware of it the way we are. They just follow their patterns and are satisfied with living in the moment. Knowing we will die means constantly planning to avoid it. Knowing we feel this means knowing others share it. It creates a prisoner's dilemma. If we all act in the best interest of the group, everyone will have what they need. But as soon as one person takes advantage of the others, they reap the benefits. Knowing this, why would you choose to be altruistic? This is the question Knowing this, why would you choose to be altruistic? This is the question every Christian struggles with, the problem of faith. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. A line that isn't in the Bible, but it certainly should be. If we're looking for a secular version of Christianity, it might be interesting to look at a secular version of Satanism. In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan. Although it caused some media panic, it's not about literal devil worship. It's a statement of philosophy based on the works of Nietzsche and Ayn Rand, as well as the idea of social Darwinism. It rejects the Christian ideal in favour of the pursuit of self-interest. LaVey's understanding of the facts was probably something similar to what we're working with, but his conclusion is different. The statement goes something like this. Humans are weak and self-interested. This creates a prisoner's dilemma. In order to maximize your own gain, you should sell out everyone else in order to get ahead. This is the route to strength. The strong survive, the weak perish. I believe this is a fair statement of his point, although if you're Luciferian, feel free to clarify. It's a logical conclusion given the facts. Most people are out for themselves, so the chances of no one selling us out are incredibly small. Why would you allow yourself to be screwed over and over again for the sake of a pipe dream? Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. The problem with this satanic ideal is that a world full of selfish people is hell. You may gain advantages in the short term, but everyone's experience degrades with the proliferation of this ideal. The only way to move past this is for someone to take the first step and offer forgiveness, even if they know there's a good chance they'll be taken advantage of, to love your enemy. Young men tend to think vulnerability is a sign of weakness, but over time you come to realize it's a sign of true strength. To stand in front of someone and know that they might hurt you, but offer them your hand regardless. To know they are your enemy not by choice, but because of their fears and insecurities. The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around. What do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters. The very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system. And that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on that system, that they will fight to protect it. There is another odd part of the Bible. It's made from the Old Testament, which is based on the Jewish Tanakh, and the New Testament, which is written by Christians. But these stories contain two very different gods. The Old Testament God is vengeful and judges people for their wrong actions, smiting those who disobey him. And the New Testament God is very hands-off and forgives those who sin. So why did God change? Well, this is where it gets weird. God is both omnipotent and omniscient. He knows everything, at least factually. But an infinitely powerful being can't understand what it is to be weak, or to know you will die. He doesn't understand our subjective experience as humans. Christianity is a reinterpretation of Judaism, not a retcon. He's still his same old vengeful self in the Old Testament, but something changes him. He tasks Lot with finding one good person in Sodom and Gomorrah, but Lot can't do it. Every person he thinks might be good is in some way corrupt. He sees this corruption as something to be destroyed. He smites the entire population, and even turns Lot's wife to a pillar of salt because some small part of her is still attached to that place. Eventually he realizes that in order to come up with better rules that humans can follow, he has to understand us better, to experience our pain and suffering so he can teach us from our point of view instead of his own. He creates Jesus, a human copy of himself, just as good as he is, but otherwise human. Jesus spends 30 years living as a normal human and doing good deeds. He meets John the Baptist and then goes on his quest. He goes out into the desert to experience pain and deprivation like he has never known. He almost gives up, but he comes back stronger than he was before. He goes to Jerusalem and attracts crowds by performing miracles, so he can teach them how to live. But the people in power hate him for it. They persecute him, and he has to hide. In the end, he's betrayed by one of his closest friends in return for 30 pieces of silver. As Jesus is dying on the cross, he realizes he has failed to save humanity, and he cries out in existential pain, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" The sky turns black as an eclipse blocks out the sun. God has abandoned the earth so that he can consider what happened. His perfect son, made from his own essence, had a crisis of faith. He realizes that he's been considering humans as individuals, purely rational like himself, without needs or wants. He comes to understand that our societies corrupt us, and that even the most righteous person must be selfish sometimes if they're to live in a selfish world. It's not surprising that Judas sold Jesus out, but it's a miracle that none of the others did in all this time. That they believed in something enough to reject their perverse incentives, to keep their faith not in God, but in each other. He realizes that it's in our nature to fail, and this is what makes our lives worthwhile. If success was guaranteed, it would be meaningless. To do good when every incentive is forcing you to be evil, that's truly beautiful. Jesus is resurrected and speaks to his disciples one last time, to let him know that he's there, watching, but that the rest is up to them. That the best we can do is try, and as long as we do that, we should be forgiven for our failures. This is why the death of Jesus represents the forgiveness of original sin. The Abrahamic religions are unusual in that they're monotheistic. In a polytheistic society, there are gods dedicated to different aspects of humanity. Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Hades, lord of the dead. Each of these represents an ideal, and different people pay tribute to different gods. The idea of a monotheistic society is that there is one ideal everyone should aspire to, an all-encompassing ideal that leads to a good life. But something unusual happened to the Abrahamic God. We forgot his name. It was known at one point, but his followers did not speak it aloud. They believed it was too holy to be spoken. The closest we have is a written version with the vowels removed, known as the Tetragrammaton. YHWH. The generally agreed upon version of this name is Yahweh, although others use the name Jehovah. Converting this into English creates a lot of alternatives, but it's generally translated as something like I am that I am, or I am who I am. I'm obviously not a religious scholar, but it makes sense that a devout follower wouldn't say this name. It's written as a statement, so in saying it, you are claiming to have achieved it. This would be like a Buddhist claiming to have achieved nirvana. A human can never fully achieve this ideal, but we should still strive towards it. But what does I am who I am mean? I think it's a statement of how to live your life, how to deal with the knowledge of death and the suffering that comes with it, how to find other people like you and form real connections. Be who you are. Accept that you will never be perfect, that no human ever can be. Accept yourself for who you are and know that that is enough. Strive to be better, but don't hide from the world because you don't think you're good enough. The best way to find yourself in this world is to be part of it. Find your own voice. Don't change yourself to match someone else's ideal. Don't create a false persona to hide your insecurities. Put yourself out there and share your unique perspective. Be afraid to do it, but do it anyway. Just be who you are. Nothing more, nothing less. Try it, and you'll find that you connect with other like-minded people. People you genuinely care about and share values with. Connect with these people without expecting anything in return, and good things will happen. Because if there's one thing AI can't replace, it's the friendship and love of another person. Someone who's not compelled to love you, but sees you for who you are and knows that for all your flaws, you are beautiful. On that note, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who reached out to me when I was feeling hopeless, and to Newel of Knowledge, whose video on perfectionism helped me draw a line under this and get it done. He probably doesn't need my endorsement, but I'll leave a link there if you want to check him out. So how do we deal with our flawed nature? How do we escape this corrupted simulation? We do it in much the same way as Neo did. Find someone who supports and believes in us so that we can find our inner strength. Try and fail without giving into frustration and doubt. Learn to be who we are and overcome our insecurities. Challenge the limitations imposed on us as Václav Havel did by living as if we are free. Find our fate in humanity through our love for individual people, romantic or platonic. Get to a place where we can start to help others. Show them that they don't need to be selfish or evil to get ahead. Realize that, for all its flaws, the simulation is part of us. That it cannot be destroyed, but must instead be healed. And hope that slowly, process by process, it becomes more human. While I was researching this, I found an old script for The Matrix. There are some more explicit mentions of Baudrillard and some other interesting bits, but what really caught my eye was that Neo's speech at the end is different. In the final script that went into the movie, it's addressed to the machines, but this one is addressed to Smith and to the viewer. I believe the Matrix can remain our cage, or it can become our chrysalis. That's what you helped me to understand. That to be free, you cannot change your cage, you have to change yourself. When I used to look out at this world, all I could see was its edges, its boundaries, its rules and controls, its leaders and laws. But now I see another world, a different world where all things are possible. A world of hope, of peace. I can't tell you how to get there, but I know that if you can free your mind, you'll find a way. If you take nothing else from this, I want to stress that life is about people. They should be treated as an end in themselves, not a means to achieve some other goal. Happiness isn't in gaining wealth or power or products. It's in seeing the people you love succeed. In supporting others. My neighbour started learning guitar, and sometimes I can hear him practicing Smells Like Teen Spirit. He's not quite there yet, but it's coming along. I could get annoyed at him for making noise, or I could reflect on how much learning to play the guitar meant to me, and be happy for him. I found out the other day that a friend I helped mentor has just been promoted to senior developer, and it brought me more joy than any promotion I've ever received myself. To paraphrase one of my favourite books, Hitchens's Letters to a Young Contrarian, I tell you about this not just to boast, though there is that, but to make up for the many months when it was not so easy. Remember that their victory is not predetermined. It may seem ironic to quote a famed opponent of Christianity in this case, but I think in many ways he lived up to the ideal much more than many of his Christian opponents. Finally, I want to take a moment to talk about the person who believed in me from day one, without whom I wouldn't be the man I am today, both literally and figuratively. The man who's probably watching this right now, my dad. He was born in 1955 in Crumlin, a working class area of Dublin. His dad died when he was quite young, leaving his mother to raise him and his two older siblings. His mother doted on him, and we still joke about her washing his hair on my parents' first date. Circumstances being what they were, he didn't have the option to go to university, so he started working to support himself and contribute to the family. He found a job in a warehouse and was happy to do whatever it took to relieve the strain on the family. One day while at work, a forklift rolled over his foot and he was hospitalized, unable to work for 6 weeks. People told him he should make a claim against the company for the injury, but he felt that that wasn't an honest thing to do. When he returned to work, they appreciated his loyalty and gave him a job in their IT department. He worked on a punch card-based stock management system that ran on Fortran on an IBM token ring network. This was a massive turning point for him and led to him working on a variety of IBM systems at different companies over the years. Most importantly, it led him to work at Willwood, a confectionery company that was later bought by Nestle. In 1980, he met my mother, who worked in the accounts department of the company. There are some fun stories about their early dates and all that kind of thing, but I'll stick to the main points here. After a few years, they wanted to get married and move in together. They were saving every penny they could while considering where they wanted to live. He'd been fascinated with stamps ever since he was a kid, and an elderly neighbour gave it to them in their collection. And he had quite a collection himself at this point. He had his stamp collection valued at £3,500, which was quite a bit of money at the time. It was enough for a 10% deposit on the house, so he sold his collection that he cherished in order to start a new life. In 1985, my parents got engaged and bought the house, my childhood home. After work, they would drive straight to the house to paint and decorate it in preparation for moving in. He would then drop my mother home in the evening, as they weren't allowed to live together until their wedding day. The next year they were finally married and went on their honeymoon in Gran Canaria, and in 1990 I was born. My dad worked a lot of overtime to support the family, but he always made me feel like I was the centre of his world. He sparked my interest in computers and music. He introduced me to Star Wars, Lord of the Rings and Monty Python. He taught me to play chess and navigate MS-DOS. He encouraged me to find things I was passionate about and pursue them. As a young kid with ADHD, this was the best thing I could ever hope for. He was never dismissive or uninterested in anything I did because he knew it was important to me, and that was enough. When I was 4 years old, he worked at Johnson & Johnson as an AS400 administrator. He would sometimes work overtime on Sundays to run maintenance jobs while the office was empty, and I would come in to work with him. I felt like a little adult going in to help him with his work, and I guess in hindsight I was helping, just not in the way I thought. My mum would drop us off in the morning and pick us up afterwards. I would sit there and draw on pieces of graph paper while he worked. Occasionally we'd walk down to the room where the mainframe was held. There was a small kitchen where we'd stop for coffee while I stood and stared at the machine in awe. An AS400 mainframe is about the size of 3 12-inch rack units, but to me it was the size of a bus. It was like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I can still picture the room in my head, down to the tall step I had to climb over and the sign saying "Mind the Step." And once we were finished, we visited the copy room, and I put my drawings in the shredder and watched in fascination as they separated into tiny strands, disappearing into the bin below. I never really understood what he did until I became a programmer myself, but I knew it was important. He had stacks of manuals on IBM Report Program Generator at home, nestled between books like Magician and The Hobbit. He was always interested in philosophy, history, and science fiction, and he helped me understand the meaning behind the stories he shared with me. I remember going to Waterstones with him many times to see if the new Song of Ice and Fire book was out, but as you know, we were always disappointed. I'd often tell him about a book or a piece of classical music I found interesting, and he'd not only know it, but he'd recommend other books that were similar. He was big into music and had an impressive hi-fi setup at home that he used to explain surround sound to me using the song Mars from Holst's Planet Suite and the way that the drums would roll around the room. He loved classical music, but when I got into metal, he was just as enthusiastic about that. Anytime we were in the car, he put on Master of Puppets and Toxicity and enjoyed just as much as I did. He'd listen to me explain what the lyrics meant to me and find new pieces for me to learn on guitar. He even brought me to my first Metallica gig. He has made me the man I am today, and believed in me every step along the way. Throughout the process of making this video, he's been there to help me work through the ideas and encourage me to keep going, even when I feel worthless. All of this is what makes him my ideal role model, the fact that he truly cared. He collected stamps not to speculate on them, but because he was interested in them. He turned down an easy injury payout because he felt that it was wrong. He sacrificed his stamp collection to put a roof over my head, and worked long hours to provide us with a great quality of life. And he never let any of that bother him because he knew it was all worth it. Because he lives for others. And seeing the people he loves succeed brings him true happiness. I only hope I can pay it forward someday by doing the same for a child of my own. And so this is for you, Dad, my very own Morpheus. For being there when I felt hopeless. For teaching me to value myself and others. For helping me get my life in order. And for letting me cheat at Snakes and Ladders. I love you. And thank you for everything.
Exorcism.
Yeah.
Therapist.
They only got one.
Where's our go? Way, we got two. Okay, move me to there, please.
1,
One.
2.
Oh, that was a great move, wasn't it? Yeah, that was great. Two's not very late. Ah, he only got two as well.
1, 2.
Yeah, he only got two. Here. Yeah, go to crush it like him. Yeah, he's got, you go to the hospital. Yeah, you go back to the hospital, let's crush it. 6.
1, 3.
Yeah, no, he's cheating. I knew that. It was my shot, wasn't it? He took another shot. You're right. Yeah, it was very bold. Now, there you go. There you go, next mate.
I got 2 for you.
No, I'll roll it.